Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Dynasty Fantasy Football League podcast. Today, Dave and I are going to cover the original startup draft. This is kind of very anticipated for me. I am very excited to dive into this. How about you, Dave?
Oh yeah, there's some good names on here. We can get right off in the first round.
Before we get too into that, we are going to cover a few things that have happened since our last recording. So talk about 2 trades that have gone down. So first, Dave, I'll let you take the lead on this one. You made the trade with Andy here, where you dealt away Cole Kmet and a 2024 second for Dallas Goedert and a 2024 fourth.
Yeah. So my thinking is my tight end spot was kind of the weak spot on my team, and I didn't like giving up the second round pick for a tight end, but the risk versus the opportunity to have a consistent top 5 tight end every week, I felt was there. So traded Kmet, who just signed a big contract to stay with Chicago for a few years, and then got Dallas Goedert, who's a couple years older, but he's in a really good offense. He's going to get a lot of targets. Obviously, a little more touchdown upside than Kmet. But
yeah, I mean, Dallas Goedert obviously is more of a win now piece. I had Cole Kmet. I've had Cole Kmet since his rookie year, and I dealt him to you earlier this offseason because I traded for Kyle Pitts and no longer thought he was really that important. But I still do like Kmet's long-term upside. But I mean, Dallas and that Philly offense, even if sometimes I feel like I get too, and some people get too into like, oh, what's their target share going to be? Well, it's like, who cares if Kmet might have a higher target share if the Eagles just are going to have way more volume, and I feel like, Kmet now, Fields might not throw more. I mean, we think he's going to, but they add DJ Moore, so that's another guy to kind of take away targets from Kmet. And for like team like yours, that's in a win now window, getting the upside with Goddard is probably more beneficial.
Consistency kind of played a big part into it. So Cole Kmet's kind of good for 5 and 60 or 70 in a week, and versus Cole Kmet that's like a A+ week for Cole Kmet. So
makes sense. And so our second deal we have here is Colin and Jesse. I think this is about Jesse's 10th deal he's made for AJ Dillon, either trading him away or getting him back. He just can't quit him. He's probably going to have to change his team name back again now, because now he's got the quads back on his roster. But I was surprised here, Jesse giving up, Jordan Love and a couple future picks to get, what I view as more, running backs I view as more like win now pieces. I mean, Bigsby, even though he's a rookie, I know, that he's getting some hype coming out of camp now that he's probably going to be the goal line back, and who knows, he's maybe even going to eat into more of Etienne's work than people originally thought. But I mean, I said, I think it makes sense for Jesse to get Tannehill, even though, he might lose his job next year or whatever. But for Jesse, he needs, he's going to sit there and hold on to Tannehill, wait for one of the contenders to get a quarterback injury or two. And then I'd be like, all right, now I'll try to flip him for, a better pick than he gave away here. I feel like Terrace Marshall is Terrace Marshall. Let's move on. Who cares? But, there's just, it's interesting, having talked to I know you probably talked to Jesse about this deal. I talked to Colin a little bit, and Colin's biggest worry, and I guess this could be, could make sense. He's like, why is the Packers fan trying to sell me the Packers quarterback? I don't like this. Like, what does he know? Or what is he, why is he trying to get rid of his team's quarterback? Like, I feel like, if if he really believed in him as a fan of the team, why would he be trading him?
Right. Yeah, Jordan Love is definitely, I mean, he's make it or break it year for sure. He's only going to have 1 year in Green Bay, so he has to produce.
Well, the contract they gave him, he basically has 2 years. So like the way they renegotiated his deal, like it's basically they can't get out of it for 2 years. So they're giving him like almost a 2-year trial. Which, I mean, but still, if he struggles, I don't see why they wouldn't bring in somebody else.
Probably draft a quarterback like Caleb Williams or something like that.
It's just an interesting move on Jesse's side. Just like Jesse's constantly like schizophrenic. Like clearly he's a win now team, or sorry, a rebuild team. But like sometimes he makes deals that I don't feel are rebuild type moves. So
I know from talking to Jesse, he really liked Tank Bigsby. So I think he feels like that Tank Bigsby can kind of take over the role from ETN. Like if they want to move on from ETN and keep the cheaper running back in Tank Bigsby, it's entirely possible. So
okay. All right. So now what we all came here to see. So let's get to that startup draft here. All right, so let's dive right in here. The first round. What do we see in the first round? What stands out to you?
Well, first one that stood out to me was Thomas at the 105. McCaffrey and Mahomes, Lamar, Saquon, kind of those. Retrospectively, they look
fine. And I mean, I do remember our original draw. I loathed having the 5th pick because at the time it was like everywhere I looked, it was, in every dynasty rankings, it was like, here's the consensus top 4. And then it's like, there's a line and then everybody else. So it was like, I felt, Michael Thomas at that time was coming off of his, 150 reception season. And it was like, I think he was still like 27 or something, 26 or 27 at the time. So it's just you can't predict him just getting hurt for 3 years at this point. Like
the pick definitely makes sense because he still had Breeze at the time too, so he still had that elite quarterback. It was just unlucky with him getting injured. I'm gonna see if I can look up his age on Pro Football Focus real quick.
Thomas, I think he's 30 now. He's either 30 or 31.
I think he's 30. Yeah, so I would put 27, 26.
3 years ago, we were doing 27 because this was before the 2020 season. But I mean, just looking at this first round, when I'm gonna do some future dynasty drafts, startup drafts, my new strategy. I mean, I guess my strategy in this draft also met that, but probably avoid running backs. I mean, we get into Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, both of them have had good years since then, but it's like now we're, in year 4 of the league and you're already, your first round pick is already done. Whereas, guys that take quarterbacks, like, Mahomes has 10 years ahead of him still, Lamar Jackson, similar boat.
I'm kind of surprised there weren't more quarterbacks taken in the first round, considering we're a super flex league.
But like I said, now, this is us in hindsight. And
right.
Like, I think if we were doing the draft now, there would be a lot more, everybody would have a better understanding that, quarterbacks are king and you kind of have to go with those quarterbacks. I mean, even wide receivers, Devontae Adams, he's still, pretty fantasy relevant. Hopkins, he's getting to the tail end, but still going to be viable. But yeah, you said you look at Cook and Elliott here. And now let's get to my favorite pick of the first round. Jesse picking Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Ooh,
Boy, did he fall off the table.
man, what just damn. Yeah, that was one of those. I mean, I'm guilty of drafting him a ton going into his rookie year and thinking he was going to be, the next huge thing with Kansas City. And like,
I
sometimes you
mean,
just can't.
honestly, it's kind of like
Sometimes you just can't.
Thomas.
You just can't predict what's going to happen.
Right. It's just like an unfortunate set of circumstances. Like, for whatever reason, he just never fit with that offense, even though it was a really good offense and he was drafted so high.
Yeah. All right. So round 2 here. This is where we first kind of see more quarterback. I mean, you're still only, through 24 picks, only 6 quarterbacks are taken. And I feel like, if we're drafting now, I can't see there being less than 10.
Right.
It was just, I think it was a lack of experience in Superflex, especially. Not even just Dynasty, but Superflex, and not realizing the true value of that position. Dennis is getting Deshaun Watson at pick 18. And I feel like at this point, Watson had a couple of just absolutely monster years. And I mean, obviously we couldn't foresee the his off the field extracurricular activities.
Right.
His
massage parlor shenanigans.
This is where, you look at some of these trades now, I mean, it's hard to look at these trades in hindsight, but jumping up for Russell Wilson, Miles Sanders, Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, those are the players that people, were moving up spots to go get. I mean, anybody else here that stands out to you? I mean, obviously we're getting to a point where, people spent second round picks, and some of these players are obviously already phasing out, even some of the wide receivers. And then
I think
the running backs.
Dak at 2.7 is kind of interesting. I mean, not that Dak is a bad quarterback at all. He has had some turnover issues, but he's kind of a sleeper. I feel like he's just consistent.
Yeah.
He's not gonna do the Patrick Mahomes and throw 5 touchdowns or anything like that. But I mean, he's just gonna get you 350 and 3 every single week. You just know what you're gonna get.
What's interesting about Dak Prescott at 207 is if you did a startup draft right now, Dak would probably go right about 207.
Yeah,
he'd probably be right in that.
Yeah,
that
like
same.
second, third round.
Yeah, like
Easy.
early to mid second, late second at the worst. But it's just like, I mean, but being able to get that kind of value there is, having that consistent presence on a roster. Trying to see, obviously I drafted Tyreek Hill at 205. I traded up a few spots and got him. I don't even remember him being on my team. I think I traded him midway through that first year. I should have been trying to sell Thomas apparently instead of Tyreek Hill, because I know we'll get into. I'll get into some of where I think I made some big blunders later in the draft. Yes, I don't even think Michael Thomas at 105 was my worst decision that I made, and not even for that, for other reasons. But here, we see some of these, Julio Jones at 210, like, and I even remember at the time I was kind of head scratching that pick, because I was just like, he was already 30 or 31 at the time, and it's one of those picks where it's like, I don't like to, in a dynasty startup like this, like basically what happened at the end of the second round when Nick made that pick is now Nick was locked into having to draft a win now team, right? His first 2 picks are Devontae Adams, Julio Jones. You're not really going to be looking at, rookies, younger players. And I feel like that's where, Nick kind of became the first one in our league to truly just like, I'm going to sell everything and go for draft picks. And I think, here shows why that happened, right? We can look at it and see now, Nick taking Julio at 210. Now he has to like lock himself into drafting a certain way, and sometimes getting locked into that can can mess with your strategy.
Mm-hmm. I know. I definitely, picking at the 101, came in with the mentality of a win now, just because I knew, my
Taking
position
McCaffrey.
was premium. Yeah. So.
All right, so let's look here at round. So and we'll kind of highlight our picks since we're the ones talking here. So we got back to you, like you said, you were looking to win now. So you go Mike Evans and Austin Eckler, which I mean, those have been those are good picks.
Tried and true picks. I think Austin Eckler was just now budding into the running back he is now. So.
Yeah. So now we get into round 3 and how the mighty have fallen. Kenny Galladay at 303. Guy went as like a top 10 wide receiver, top 15 wide receiver in this draft, and is just absolutely crazy. Like trying to fathom that at this point. We're in 2023, thinking of Kenny Galladay as a top 30 pick in a fantasy draft is just crazy. Sorry to pick on you here, Doyle, but obviously I feel like at the time it was a pick that a lot of us probably would have made. He had big seasons with the Lions, and I don't even know. I think this is before he signed with New York, but this is when he was
I think he still had a year.
Yeah,
I think he still had a year with the Lions at least. So you got a little bit out of him, Doyle, just a little bit.
So I'm trying to see if I see. Oh yeah, Ben took Jonathan Taylor at 305. It's been a really good boom pick for him. I mean, I'm going to highlight. I feel like it's hard to do winners and losers with how we have the draft organized here, but I definitely will say Ben's team has been set up and done really well because of how he drafted in the startup draft. We'll get into it later, but I mean, I think in the 4th and 5th round, I think is where it is, where he takes Josh Allen and Joe Burrow in the 4th and 5th round of the startup draft. So it's like, he's, making these picks, young quarterbacks that both boomed and are now top 5 players.
Yeah, like we were touching on earlier, like having two quarterbacks in our league as a backbone to work off is just so big. It easily can make or break the team.
Honestly, 3rd round, I don't really see any too many noteworthy picks. I mean, yeah, you can talk about Kenyon Drake, but like I said, running backs. I feel like every running back, almost every running back, is going to look overdrafted because I feel like running backs just cycle in and out so shuffle in and out so quickly. It's so hard to have a running back be fantasy relevant, at a high level for more than a few seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to the 4th round. These are rounds where I actually start having stronger opinions. So I'll talk about Andy here because Andy kind of. So I feel like a lot of us really didn't know what we were doing in this draft. We'll highlight that. As far as sometimes you're making. I feel like people were just like everyone had rankings and didn't really know what to do other than just like I'm going to go off my rankings. And Andy, I feel like actually came in with a strategy that you'll notice as we start going. There's a point, like, I mean, even here he's drafting DK Metcalf and J.K. Dobbins. This is DK Metcalf after this is either his 2nd or 3rd year, and then just was J.K. Dobbins' rookie year. Like, there's a point where I feel like Andy just is like, okay, now I'm only drafting rookies, and he just like embraces I'm not gonna. He was one of the few teams I thought that actually embraced let's not try to win now, but let's just draft like high upside players that could see their values go up. And now he, and look at his team now, he has kind of built this elite roster that has just depth all over the place because a lot of the picks that he made in the startup draft, he's either seeing their value go up and traded or just, kept them at their values and just continued to acquire more and more of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I acquired DK Metcalf from Andy. And I think I think I gave him Samuel.
I think
It was like Samuel in the second or something like that.
No, I thought your DK Metcalf deal with him was you were trading your first round pick because the one year he had back-to-back picks at 2 and 3, and I think I felt like, but I mean that means he used that to get Trey Lance, which really has been a 0.
Yeah.
But so okay, go ahead, roast me. I took Carson Wentz at 402.
I mean, again, that's like he was in the Eagles offense at that point.
He was really good, actually.
Yeah, he was good at that point. So I mean, it's just,
and he was young. It was like I drafted like a 25-year-old quarterback, thinking, okay, cool, I've got a quarterback for 10 years, and I had a quarterback for half a season, basically.
Yeah, he gets hurt and then goes to Washington and
then Indy
and fizzles out. Yeah. Then with Josh Allen again, there, getting the top 2 quarterbacks.
Yep. Yes, like I said, Ben here at 409, and then 504. Yeah, he takes Burrow or Allen and Burrow. And I will say, so here's a time where I actually remember things from the start of draft. Because we'll talk about this other. So I know I originally drafted Cortland Sutton at 408, where Jesse was. That was my pick, and Jesse ended up trading his first round pick the next year to me for Cortland Sutton. But I remember at that pick, because I wanted to try and lock in 2 young quarterbacks early. That was my plan going into this. So I drafted Wentz at 402. And then I was looking at either Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, or Cortland Sutton at 408. I knew that for a fact. And I was like, I think one of them will be there at my next pick. And then Ben had to pick both of them between my 2 picks, and just basically blew up my draft. At that point, I didn't know what to do. There wasn't really anyone else that I really had highlighted as guys I wanted in this area. So then so actually not CeeDee Lamb, but in the next round is where I kind of feel like I go off the rails and just don't know what I'm doing. So we'll get into that. But I'll mention this. So I mentioned, Nick at 210 picking Julio. It kind of like locks him into going for a win now. And so now we see where that snowball starts rolling. Nick at 407 takes Le'Veon Bell. Nick at 503 takes Drew Brees. So now he's sitting there with Julio Jones, Le'Veon Bell, Drew Brees. He drafted Travis Kelce. Like, this is, that's a team now where you basically just have to keep going down that path.
Mm-hmm.
And, Nick ends up basically trading all these guys away for future firsts, and, has been completely out of contention for 2 full seasons at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So where, sometimes trying to draft those guys, can just basically, like I said, just blow up an entire draft. But I'll let you talk about your next 2 picks here. So you took McLaurin and Mark Andrews. So you drafted Mark Andrews.
Yeah. Terry, I think at that point it was either his sophomore year.
I think he was coming. Yeah, he had already had his rookie year.
So he just had a really good rookie year. So a young receiver to build on. Same with Mark Andrews at that point. I think it was Mark Andrews' sophomore year as well. So just 2 young players to build off of that were also good win now pieces.
Yeah. So one other 4th round pick here I was going to mention was Doyle taking Chris Carson. Like I said, some of these running backs, it's like I can't even remember Chris Carson being relevant enough to be a 4th round pick, let alone a dynasty 4th round pick. But it's just crazy that 3 years later, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about Chris Carson. Like, I forgot that he was there.
Same with even Devin Singletary. at
Yeah,
4'11"
I mean,
by
he's
Tony.
a guy that's still bopping around the league, though.
Yeah.
I think that was Devin Singletary. I think that was his rookie year as well. I believe so. He's either his rookie year or his sophomore year. So he still kind of had that kind of like hadn't had the shine wear off yet. Whereas
Mhm.
now I feel like everybody just knows he is what he is at this point. All right, so let's move to round 5. There's some obvious boom picks here as we start seeing. This was probably the best pick I made in the entire draft. I took CeeDee Lamb at 505, his rookie year. Obviously he's now become, a top end wide receiver in the league. Dennis at 507. I think this is when Minnesota traded him to Buffalo, and everybody like bailed on him and thought he was going to suck because he was going from Minnesota, from having Cousins to Josh Allen, which sounds hilarious now, but back then it was like Josh Allen was viewed as he was a good fantasy quarterback because he could run and score rushing touchdowns. Like nobody was really, nobody was really excited about him throwing the ball, but sometimes that's one of those rare ones where a player goes to a new team and actually gets better and later in his career. I mean, the 5th round here is pretty loaded, actually, other than there's a couple weird.
I was going to say you can definitely see a change between the 4th and 5th round. It's like, obviously there's good players that are on here, but I think it also kind of speaks to us kind of figuring out, all right, this is how we should start drafting in a dynasty league.
Right.
So I mean, all besides like Drew Brees, who's retired now, and Baker Mayfield, all these picks are still very relevant today. Cooper Kupp, Joe Burrow, Lamb, Montgomery, Akers, Connor,
and not Leonard Fournette, but
not Leonard Fournette. Yeah, I mean he's got a job. So, well, no, actually, no, he didn't get signed.
He's not signed anywhere.
Yeah.
So the 5th round I think is pretty strong across the board. Everybody's picking, players that kind of fit what they're trying to do now, or people at least are. I feel like people now are starting to realize, okay, am I a contender? What should I start doing? Different things like that. Okay, I'll get into me now here in round 6. This is where I feel. Oh, sorry, I want to highlight 6 and 7, sort of my pick in 7. So this is where, up to this point, I've been like, I had a strategy. I said I wanted to get those 2 quarterbacks. I didn't get the second one. So now I start kind of panicking, not knowing what to do. And instead of just like continuing to say, like, I'm going to draft valuable players, I'm going to try and just like get the most bang for my buck. I decide, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to draft to fill on a starting lineup. And so I draft my next 2 picks, Melvin Gordon and Kareem Hunt, which like I'm looking and I know that I had players I was, targeting in these ranges and, that I liked that I would have drafted. But for some reason, I just decided to start like, I'm going to make sure that I can put a good starting lineup out there. And sometimes that's not that important.
Right.
Sometimes I feel like I needed to kind of I felt like everybody started to like I said, like make sure they were filling in their roster and get, drafting players that, would fit their, and I felt like I kind of fell into that trap with everybody when I should have maybe been zagging instead of zigging, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I maybe should have gone the Andy route and said like, you know what, I probably don't have a team that can win at this point. I had already traded away Cortland Sutton. My only going into drafting these 2 guys, the only people I actually had on my roster were, Michael Thomas and Tyreek Hill, Carson Wentz, and CeeDee Lamb. So it's like, I looked at my roster and I was like, I've got to draft running backs. And it was like all the young ones were gone. I was just like, I'm going to try to get guys that I think can get me points. And I feel like this is, like I said, this is kind of where I felt like my startup went south.
Did we, was our initial draft a slow draft or were we picking?
Yeah, we did a slow draft. And I think I'll also mention that I remember thinking your 2 picks were hilarious because,
It could be more different.
it could not have been more different. You drafted two quarterbacks, one who could have retired at any moment, and the other, I think, was a rookie. So
Rookie,
it's like,
yeah.
and it was like clearly not going to play at all, like his rookie year, because he was coming off the hip injury, and they still had, I think, Fitzpatrick. And so, like, the plan going into the season for Tua was he was going to sit.
Yeah. No, it was definitely an opposite ends pick. But at that point, Tom Brady was still pretty elite, so it's a pretty solid pick. Just looking.
I mean, I will say, Tom Brady gave you several good seasons to have your team. I think your team's made the playoffs all 3 years, and part of that is because of Tom Brady. But it's just funny seeing that somebody took two basically polar opposite build players back to back, which in startup you can still do things like that. It's like, even though I have a win now team, I still like this rookie. You still want some upside for those rookie, for those rookies and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I think part of it, knowing that Tom Brady was going to retire at any point, that kind of baked into me picking Tua at the next spot, even though I knew he wasn't going to be starting right away. But
right. Yeah, I mean, there's some funny quarterbacks and stuff in here. I mean, Andy took Drew. I mean, see, here's the thing. I talked about Andy did so well and did things, but then Andy also took Drew Lock in the 6th round. So, hey, I found a way to roast Andy. Love it. And Zach Moss in the 7th. So, see, for every DK Metcalf and J.K. Dobbins, there's a Drew Lock and a Zach Moss. Guys that really didn't do much of anything. Or just caused headaches. I remember Zach. So you mentioned Devin Singletary earlier. It's like the two of them, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, just were forever just trapped in a void of neither of them really doing anything. I mean, just looking at some players here, why would anyone draft Tyler Boyd in the 6th round? Like, I don't know how that was a pick. But do you see anybody else here that you're?
No, not anyone in the 6th round. There's some interesting picks in the 7th round. You got Nick Stoll taking Justin Jefferson at the 709.
Yeah, so that was I do know for a fact. One of the reasons I am very mad at my stupid running backs in the 6th and 7th is because, yes, I was probably, if I don't draft them, I'm probably drafting a player like. I mean, the thing is, there was a lot of Jalen Reagor hype. I do remember that being a thing back then. And I feel like I would have been the idiot that would have drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. I probably would have been that moron. So maybe I'm glad that I had Kareem Hunt save me from myself. But I definitely think that, yeah, had I embraced the, just draft, go young at that point, that I probably would have been looking at one of those guys. I also think it's funny here that, I was talking about Nick kept, forcing himself into this win now build with some of his players. So then here in round 7, he finally decides, you know what? I got too many old guys. I need a young upside guy that I definitely know is going to be in the league for quite a while. So he drafted Henry Ruggs. Oh, he's still playing, right?
He's playing some sort of ball now.
Yeah. Sorry, there's way too much buildup for a terrible joke.
Oh man, it's actually his sentence just came out today. It's like 3 to 10 years.
Yeah. So. So I finally took my second quarterback, Jared Goff. Paired paired those two gems together, Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Yeah. Who else was? I mean, yeah. There's some solid picks in the 7th also with Jerry Jeudy. We got, Keenan Allen's been just steady as they come.
Dennis has been holding on to Gibson for forever. So
he's holding and holding.
Yeah,
he's holding on to something. Let's go to round 8. Who do you got here? Let's go back to your picks. Kerryon Johnson and AJ Green. Here we go. Here's a couple old timers.
I think AJ Green was still in Cincy at that time, if I remember correctly. He's still relevant player in Cincy. And I think Kerryon Johnson, that would have been his rookie or sophomore year, I think.
This was DeAndre Swift's rookie year.
Okay, so it would have been Kerryon's.
I think he was probably in his third. I think he's at least in his third, yeah. So you were kind of betting on maybe Swift not being awesome or being injury prone, but
right.
Maybe Kerryon just wasn't that good either. So Jesse with a nice Cam Newton selection here in round 8. He took Aaron Rodgers and Cam Newton. I think those were his first 2 quarterbacks. I do remember that. And thinking those were interesting. Was this when Cam Newton was on? I think this is when Cam Newton was on the Patriots, which just sounds like a weird sentence. Like, that doesn't even sound like it's like real. I'm pretty sure though that's when the Patriots had signed Cam and everyone thought he was going to be the starter, and he basically played like 2 games. And
I thought it was. Wasn't he pretty good in those 2 games, if I remember correctly? Or
I don't know.
I thought he had a couple solid games, and then he got hurt. Anyways,
but I think I finally made the best pick in round 8. So finally I get to not make fun of myself when I got Deebo Samuel, traded up a few spots to snag him near the end of the 8th round, and then. Obviously, I was smart enough to trade him before he was, had his really good season. I think that's a common theme. I'm like reading all these players that I drafted in the startup, and I can't remember any of them being on my team, except for Michael Thomas, who I held on to forever.
Like Mark Andrews for me, couldn't even tell you what trade I got rid of him in.
We mentioned this before we recorded. We were talking about Mark Andrews, and I'm almost positive I traded you Deebo Samuel for Mark Andrews in some sort of deal. I mean, which I guess you say that now and you're like, I mean, that's probably a pretty solid deal. Like, two pretty good players. And this is 8th round is kind of a rough one when I look at it here. I mean, obviously now we're getting to the point where there's going to be some, rough picks. We're getting into the beyond pick 100 in a draft from 3 years ago. So obviously, there's going to be a lot of guys here that didn't really make an impact or just are kind of flamed out of the league or just are old, too old to matter. Jesse here drafted his favorite player. At the end of the 9th round.
Quadzilla.
And so, I mentioned for every Andy pick of what did I say? Zach Moss and somebody, I can't remember who the other one was, but Drew Lock. But then he snags Michael Pittman. Just getting these guys that step up and become the number 1 receivers on their team. But who knows what they were going to be when they were going into their rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
Some fun ones here. Gardner Minshew.
I was going to mention Noah Fant by Callan at 903. He was really hyped up coming out of college, and so the pick makes sense. He just never panned out in the NFL.
Round 10 is really the last one we'll look at in depth. Might hit a few players, but round 10, there's just some funny ones here. I feel like every year there's going to be a rookie hype train or two. And I think the rookie hype train here of Dennis taking Lynn Bowden at 10:06. I mean, I don't even know who this guy is.
Yeah, I don't. I saw that name, like, who's that? Kind of like Preston Williams at 10:10.
I do remember Preston Williams only because I was like convinced Preston Williams was going to be amazing. I was so mad that somebody drafted him. I was like, I was hoping to get him late, and like in every league I had that year, Preston Williams, I was picking up at the very end of drafts saying, "Oh, this guy is going to be sweet." And I mean, he scored some touchdowns, he did some stuff, but it was nothing.
I mean, there's still some relevant guys on here. You got Deontay Johnson. You picked Deontay.
Hey, another round with me making a really good pick.
I took Christian Kirk, who's still
that was
still pretty relevant. Julian Edelman had some good seasons for Nick. McCole Hardman, who just kind of bounces around. Him and Darius Slayton have just kind of been just like so.
Yeah, and so here I'm going to highlight. I have Ben's pick here, 11th round, 11:04, Justin Herbert. Like this is to me, this is a prime example of us just not being in tune with like how Dynasty League works, how Superflex leagues work. Like think of this right now. Justin Herbert was drafted 6th overall in the NFL draft. And we had him go in the 11th round of this startup. Like, you know, I remember at one point I went through and like mapped out like, okay, say we had just done a rookie draft and the rookies went in the same order they went in our draft. This would have been a first round top 10 overall quarterback going in like the middle of the 3rd round of our rookie draft. That's like insanity. Like if you told me that happened in our draft this year, that Anthony Richardson went in the 3rd round, I would have told you were freaking crazy. Like I think that is definitely a prime example of, our inexperience at the time.
Right.
And maybe even this also could have been people that were making dynasty rankings, dynasty not being as prevalent or as popular as it is now, because I feel like that's what we were all basing a lot of stuff on, was going off of rankings and, people just suppressing Herbert down for whatever reason.
Or using redraft rankings instead of dynasty rankings.
Yeah. And I do remember because I picked my 3rd quarterback, the very next pick, Sam Darnold. And I do remember that I basically knew I was taking a quarterback and I was like, okay, this is like where my tier of quarterbacks fall off. And the last 2 I had in it were Darnold and Herbert. And of course, once again, the guy that kept screwing me over in this startup, Ben, picking right before me, he took my Josh Allen, Joe Burrow earlier. He takes Herbert from me here. And look at that now. Like that's Ben drafted 3 of probably the top 6 quarterbacks from the last 3 years in this startup. And we look at his team and wonder how he's been relevant and in contention every year. And that's why, he being able to nail that startup draft is just clutch. And so he definitely did that. Let's just see if I see, if you see anybody that you want to talk about. And then we'll just kind of wrap things up and just talk about anything.
There's
advice we could give our past selves if we.
Right. Yeah, there's not too much after.
Dennis snagged Tony Pollard here in the 12th.
Yeah, Tony Pollard, I saw that.
I mean, I picked
Madison.
I made this amazing pick here, Bryce Love. Probably don't even know who that is. I don't even know who that is. He had to pair Rob Gronkowski.
Penny in the 12th round.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about Rashad Penny. I held on to that guy for like ever. And then I finally was like, all right, I'm done. This guy can't stay healthy. He's done. And then basically that's when he went off.
So let's maybe talk about this a little bit. So Rashad Penny was a 1st-round draft pick. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was also a 1st-round draft pick. One goes 112, one goes 12-10. What do you think?
Well,
What do you think happened there?
Well, this was not Rashad Penny's rookie year.
Okay.
So we had already seen him either struggle or just not be on the field.
Okay.
I think this was more of a. I think Rashad Penny was coming off of a torn ACL. I believe that. Yeah, this was either his second year or his third year, but in his rookie year, I think this was his second year, and he tore his ACL in his rookie year. So that's definitely going to play into that. But yeah, I think the prior year, you would have seen a Rashad Penny going pretty high in a starting draft. But yeah, I mean, one thing I would definitely say, kind of looking back on this and learning from it, is try to figure out what other people are doing and then maybe try to do the opposite of that. Because I feel like, you get into these dynasty drafts, and if you realize that like everybody's drafting to win now, then probably the best strategy is definitely to kind of quote unquote embrace the tank, or as I've seen it called, the productive struggle, where like you're not actively trying to lose, but you're also not actively trying to win. You're taking, chances on higher upside players. This is where I think Andy definitely, where you can see how he built a really, really, really good roster, right? Look at some of his picks we have here. We have Alan Lazard. I mean, whatever. But we have Brandon Ayuk, right, in the 12th round. He's got, I thought I saw another one here. No, not Darrington Evans. T. Higgins in the 14th round, right?
Mm-hmm.
So look at these are guys that, are still on his roster, and they're guys that are, wide receiver twos for him. And, he just stacked up these guys. Dallas Goedert in the 15th round, he's just grabbing these young guys with upside that people don't really know about. And yeah, obviously you're not going to hit on all of them. If you see a Justin Jackson here, you see a Brian Hill, I don't even know who that is. But all you need to do is hit on a couple of these guys that all of a sudden become something. But I think the lesson I learned is, you should be looking to take a T. Higgins instead of, some of these guys that have been around a while, that it's like, you kind of know what you're going to get, whereas maybe the unknown is the better choice late in draft. Some of these guys that have pretty good NFL draft capital and maybe are in their second season or even as a rookie, and just take shots on them and try to build that. But on the counter side, you get in these leagues where everybody thinks that's the best strategy, where it's, I'm going to go productive struggle. And then all of a sudden you see, guys that are first round picks in a redraft league that are slipping to the third, fourth round. And then you got to say like, well, maybe I just start scooping all these guys, win a ship, and then hope, to pay for my next 10 years in the league, and use that time to try to build a second one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's one that I wanted to touch on. Jesse with Jalen Hurts in the 15th round. We were talking about it before we started recording, and how even the last couple of years, how Jalen Hurts was still kind of the middle of the pack quarterback.
Right. Not everybody's Justin Jefferson, right? Not everybody can just walk into the league and basically become the best receiver in the league at their rookie season.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it does take a little bit of time. And I feel like that's where, sometimes we joked the one episode that Andy was quote unquote too patient, but sometimes that's what you need. He sat and waited, and now a lot of these later round picks have, kind of developed into, his starting level players.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, I think that's gonna wrap us up for tonight on this portion of what we're talking about. So, closing thoughts, Dave, or any I've asked everybody for predictions about our league, about fantasy in general, about the NFL. Anything you got? Bold or unbold, either
or unbold,
or italics, whichever you prefer.
So I, talking to our past selves, in this draft, definitely drafting in the early rounds to mitigate risk as best as possible. You know, kind of like we were talking about Ben and the picks that he made with his quarterbacks that he took. I mean, he's pretty much set for that could be the rest. That could be his quarterbacks for the next, 8 to 10 years. So, taking that approach, building off of positions who are going to score the most points, quarterbacks,
and they have the most
receivers,
longevity.
Most longevity, yeah. Predictions this year. Let me pull up our. Actually, I got to sleep over here. Pull up our league real quick. I think our week one matchup this week, or our week one matchup between me and Andy, I think I'll set the tone for the season. Andy still has a pretty solid team. He's the back-to-back, or no, he's runner-up. Sorry, so
he's not sure runner-up.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how Tony's team does this year. He's kind of in a rebuild mode now, but he still has Mahomes and Aaron Jones and Stevenson. So he's taken some baby steps to start rebuilding, but he still has some good pieces to build a strong team. Collins definitely got one of the stronger teams with Herbert and Jalen Hurts now, and the receiver stack with Brown. Let's see, go take a look at it.
How many wins will Jesse get? That's really the question we all are wondering about. Will it be 1 or will it be 0? That's about as high as I'll go. Is 1.
I would put it.
Maybe
I would
2.
put the over under at a half.
0.5. 0.5 wins.
But look at his team next year. He's got like 9 first-round picks. So it could be next 3-4 years could be right back at the top. But
yeah, I'll wake me up in 2027 when his team will be relevant. So
yeah.
So if that's all you got, I enjoyed kind of looking back at that and just kind of going through thought processes and just kind of seeing where we thought people did well, did not do as well, and had fun.
To close it out, I will say that Nick's team's kind of got the dark horse team this year. He's got a couple of young quarterbacks, but he's got a really solid core. If Walker can produce like he did last year, Pierce, he could be a sneaky playoff boomer if Ritter and Bryce Young can pan out this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I definitely think 2024 is when we're going to see the Nick full resurgence. But it could be one of those. I had said last year that I liked Andy's team, but I definitely thought his real contention window was not till this year, and his team kind of jumped a year before I thought it would. So maybe Nick's could do something similar. So, all right, that's going to wrap us up. Thanks for joining us on episode 3 and episode 4. I'm still not sure what's going to happen, but a lot of us have some drafts coming up. So my thought is at some point we're probably going to break down some other league drafts that some of us are in together, and then before the season starts, do a full season preview of kind of break down everybody's teams, and then make predictions as to where everyone's going to finish, who's going to make the playoffs, so that everybody can play it back to me at the end of the season when I'm terribly wrong. So, all right, that'll sign us off, and thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.